Welcome to Endurance Noise Live, where I bring you the newest endurance information from around the world. And so I'm going to start off today. It's very warm here in Bakersfield, California. As you can tell, my shirt's a little bit wet. It was like in the 80s at 5:30 in the morning. Alexa, what's the temperature?
Right now, it's 84 degrees Fahrenheit. Today, expect a high of 109 degrees.
Lovely times. Speaking of high temperatures, recently last week, Harvey Lewis broke the record for bad water to the top of Mount Whitney. Been a long-standing record that Marshall Ulrich had held. And thankfully he did it last week, because yesterday Death Valley had a high temperature of 130 degrees. It's the temperature at 3:41 on Sunday, August 16th. If verified, it'd be the hottest temperature officially verified since 1913, also in Death Valley. It will also break the record high in August of 125 that it was held in 1994. So it'll also break the monthly record for 127, which is set in 1933, 1993. So pretty dang warm here in California. I was talking to the jester who was up in Salem, Oregon, and he got second in the 100-mile, not the 100-mile, the 24-hour race with 112 miles. And he said temperatures there got into the hundreds as well. Speaking of hot action, a high schooler, Justin Robinson, runs 400-meter world record lead yesterday, 44.91, high score. Granted, this year track has been odd, but there's been a few meets, and he now has the record. The other day, I was listening to Let's Run, where I get a lot of information, and they were talking to Dave Smith, who is the cross-country coach, won a couple national titles, and they've got a great new facility there, and they were supposed to hold the championship, but then, of course, he was talking about definitely having the championship, but now that all those championships have been canceled, and so he reports, reacting to the NCAA decision to cancel all fall sports championships. He says, I told the NCAA yesterday when they asked me if we could host in March, I said, yeah, our team's papers ready to turn in, and now you want us to extend to March? Oh, our term papers do. We can do that, but we can do it right now. That's kind of how I feel. We're going to figure out some way to have a competitive season this fall, and then maybe the NCAA championship season in the winter or spring. So I told them we were going to run a 10,000 meter race for the men, 6,000 for the women on November 21st, the date of the national championship, whether it's just us or some other schools in a scrimmage or limited season that does not burn our eligibility. We're going to have some competitive opportunities on that date, and hopefully some others to go with it. And that's an interesting thing here talking in this article. It's odd that the men run 10,000 and the women run 6,000. High school, when I ran way back in the late 70s and 80s, early 80s, the girls ran 2 mile and the boys ran 3 mile. But what used to really happen was, and in some areas here, we moved it up to where the boys all do 3 mile and the girls do 3 mile. Frost soft JV also. But back when I was running, they would often throw the varsity girls in with the Frost soft or JV boys. And the boys hated it, especially here in town, because we had Linda Gone, who 800 time is still in the top 10. She ran around 2 flat way back in the day, ran like a 4:45 mile back in 1991. She went to UCLA, North High, Bakersfield gal. Speaking of Bakersfield, catch my podcast I did yesterday with Nathan Berg, who does Bones of Brundage. It's basically the music scene in the 80s and 90s in Bakersfield, including Korn and many other people. I'm in it a little bit. I had a record store for 20 years, so it's not really music related, but if you're interested in just finding out about, not music related, it's not endurance related, but it's still a very good documentary, and it can be found on Amazon Prime. And so to continue on with the theme of last Friday, the huge news of Joshua's 5K world record. Well, there were other records going on, or not records, but there were other good races at the Monaco race, including the men's 1500. Chariot is still the king as Jacob Ingerson breaks the European record. Despite awful pacing, by his training partner, Timothy Chariot, still did a really fast time. But like the guy went out in 52:59, and then the next lap was 58:65, which is pretty crazy. So that was good that they still ended up running a race. And it basically comes out to that Chariot is just very hard to beat. It doesn't matter whether the paces were on or off. He just kind of gets it done. And he, it says here that in 14 of the last Diamond League meets, 1,500 miles dating back to 2017, he's won 13 of it. Pretty impressive. Jacob Ingerson was right behind, and I remember watching the race live, and as soon as he crossed the line, you could just be like, dang it, he knew he had it. He still got a European record, but you could tell he really wanted to win, and you love seeing that in athletes. And it's interesting that age has been a thing with Jacob ever since he became the youngest sub-4 miler in history as a 16-year-old in 2017. Speaking of 16-year-olds, there was that Reinhold guy yesterday. On Saturday, he ran and broke the 16 American record and ran like 4:01. So he will now be a junior and soon turn 17. But Ingerson is going to be 20 in about a month. But he did run an American record. He broke Mo Farah's European record with a 3:28.68. Very good time. Only 15 men have done that. And so it'll be interesting to see what he does in the future. Then on to the 800, of course. That was another great race. Donavan Brazier, who broke the American record recently last year at the World Championships, which was quite impressive to run a world record and do it in the World Championships. He ran a great tactical race, just took the lead, and Bryce Hoppel did come up on him, and he won it. And it says he said that Brazier take care of business. He can win from the back, he can win from the front, and he definitely pulled off a good win considering there was a fast race. He had 7 guys under 145. And then the big thing from that race was Bryce Hoppel. I've watched this young man run for Kansas, won all kinds of races, but he hasn't run a race, they said, so it's the indoor season way back in like February. And he ends up showing up, running in his first race in 6 months, his first Diamond League. He flies all the way over to Europe, and he drops a huge PR, goes from 144.25 to 143.23. That's a 1-second PR, and pretty impressive. No tune-up races, nothing. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of rivalry these two have. Hoppel's 22, Brazier is 23. In the women's 1,000, which isn't a race that's run very often, Faith Kipyegon almost broke the world record, and very fast times on that stuff. It's interesting that she gave birth to a daughter in 2018 and returned to the track almost 2 years away and ran 3:59 in her first race back at the pre-classic. Pretty impressive. And so she was running well, and pretty much everybody ran well because it's not much of a race. It's not a race that's held much. There were 5 national records. Muir did a British record. Claire from Ireland, was also a record-setting performance. The one person who didn't run really well was Raven Rogers, Oregon legend. She's more of an 800 person, and it just seemed like the 1,000 was a little too far for her. Then, of course, there was also the women's 5,000, which was an equally good race, and Hellen Obiri dominates, and she took the win with an amazing little pass on the inside lane, which was kind of crazy. And so that was a good race. We talk about Shelley Houlihan, who recently broke the American record kind of in an inter-squad meet, and she ran 14:23 in Portland, so you kind of wonder what she would have done if she'd been in Monaco, where Obiri ran 14:22. Of course, Portland's a much better weather than Monaco was, but it would be interesting to see what Houlihan would do. Then, of course, also Laura Whiteman, Jessica Hall, and Shannon Rowberry all had good races. Shannon Rowberry ran 14:45, and at age 35, it's pretty impressive. So that's kind of some endurance noise. Not a whole lot going on. Didn't really see much of anything going on in the ultra world, except for Ed's second place there at the Angarel 24-hour race. So if you've got stories, got questions, you can reach out to me on social media. I'm Andy Noyes on almost everything. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also on podcast, Apple Podcasts. Rate this show if you would. So as always, stay healthy, be boring, not epic.